조선 정부 대표단이 모스크바에 지금 도착한 것은 조선민주주의 인민공화국과 소비에트 연맹과의 사이에 정치적, 경제적, 문화적.
Stalin, preoccupied with crisis in Berlin, rejected Kim's request to invade. By the end of 1949, the international situation had been transformed. The Soviets detonated their first atom bomb. And the communist revolution in China was finally successful. Mao Zedong proclaimed the People's Republic of China. A treaty of friendship between Mao and Stalin created a communist global alliance, opening a second front of the Cold War in Asia. Stalin was confident that the United States lacked the will to respond to events in Asia. June 25th, 1950. The North Korean army launches its surprise assault on the south.
I remember vividly even today that the war broke out. It was Sunday morning. We heard this kind of remote roaring noise from the north.
Equipped with Russian tanks and artillery and directed by Soviet, the North Korean army flooded south.
We believed that we had to fight for our motherland, for our people, for our leader, Kim Il-sung. We believed it would be better to liberate the South and to unify Korea. That's what we were fighting for.
Sunday morning in Korea, Saturday evening in Washington. The Sunday papers prepare to go to press.
It was Saturday evening. I got a telephone call from the UP duty officer saying that Korea had been invaded by North Koreans. And momentarily they remarked, I didn't know what to say. Whether he was joking with me or whether he was really sure.
Senior officials were recalled that night to the
South Korea. I think there was an immediate sense that action had to be taken. Exactly what that action was to be and how far it was to go, it was not something we could plan on. Plan for a war started by North Korea with South Korea.
And about midnight, there was a call from President Syngman-rhee. I took the receiver and I said, please ask American government to rush.
The South Korean ambassador went immediately to the State Department to see Assistant Secretary.
I quote him. This alone cannot. It is a matter the world has to be concerned. And with that judgment, we have decided to summon the Security Council for an emergency session.
Noting with grave concern the armed invasion of the Republic of Korea by armed forces from North Korea.
The following day, the Security Council met. Moscow was boycotting the United Nations because of its refusal to admit Communist China. The United States seized the opportunity Two days later, the Security Council voted to create a United Nations military force to defend South Korea.
This is in fact an attack on the
stop the anywhere in the world. We wanted to stem the tide of communism.
General Douglas MacArthur, the Allied Supreme Commander in Tokyo and the legendary victor of the Pacific War, was appointed to lead the United Nations forces.
He was worshipped in Japan. This man had a tremendous ego and fed all the ships. I do believe he was this great.
The nearest troops to Korea were the American occupation force in Japan, few of whom were ready for combat.
The lifestyle involved a lot of leisure. Alithas lived through the Sears Roebuck catalog, who bought nylons and whatnot for the native girls and that sort of thing. It was a good life.
The U.S. task force sent to Korea didn't imagine their stay would be for long.
As a matter of fact, we were told to take our athletic equipment and leave everything else behind because we'd only be gone for maybe 6 weeks. Have a show of force in the field, and those groups would go back across 38th parallel, and we'd come home.
It wouldn't be that easy. Rhee's South Korean army was in retreat. 2 divisions threw their weapons away and joined the refugees fleeing.
As soldiers, we did our utmost, but the overall situation was going against us. The North Korean army achieved its initial objective.
With the capture of the southern capital, Kim Il-sung won a great victory for communism.
When we got to Seoul, the army told us the campaign was finished. They told us political reforms will follow. Now the country will be unified.
American troops fared no better than the South Koreans. With no effective anti-tank weapons, the American line collapsed. Within days, were reeling back in disarray under assault from the tiny communist regime of North Korea.
We had equipment left over from World War II. We were in very poor shape for everything. We were not ready to fight a war. That's what it amounts to. That's the long and short of it.
Around the world, America's allies rallied behind the United Nations flag. The British Prime Minister pledged his support.
If the United Nations organization was not to go the way of the old League of Nations, it was absolutely and imperatively necessary that a halt should be called.
Troops from 15 nations began to arrive in Korea to join the Americans in the UN Army. General MacArthur took a gamble to turn the tide of the war. With the UN forces driven back to a tiny enclave at Pusan, a vast seaborne invasion 150 miles attempt to sever and then roll back the North Korean advance. September 15th, 1950. The largest invasion fleet since the Second World War was the port of Incheon. American and Korean Marines go ashore in huge numbers.
When we landed, we approached the beach at full speed. The ramp of the landing craft opened with a bang, and we charged with our guns, screaming down the ramp.
There was a seawall there, cut stone. They had to be scaled. The actual landing conditions were terrible. Part of the city was on fire. It was a rainy day, and the rain was mixing with the smoke of the fire and the smoke of the bombardment. If those beaches had been defended by Japanese or German troops of the same quality as the Germans and Japanese were in World War II, we would have been lucky to get ashore, and we might not have been quite so lucky once we got ashore.
Within 2 weeks, UN troops were engaged in a fierce battle to recapture the southern capital, Seoul. 50,000 civilians were killed in the crossfire.
My house was located in a hillside, and there was a crossfire between the UN forces and the North Korean People's Army on the northern side. Finally, my father told us that it would be better that somebody will have to survive.
After finally recapturing Seoul, MacArthur reinstated Syngman Rhee in the Parliament building. MacArthur's association with Rhee's increasingly vicious regime caused concern in Washington.
Syngman Rhee was a difficult man to back. And once he was in power, it was very difficult for us to do anything. It was not up to us to change the government, and there was no other alternative, obviously, available anyway.
Rhee's jubilant army was the first to cross the 38th parallel into North Korea.
Every day, soldiers and people thought now the drive was on to unify the
The UN troops, too, advanced into North Korea. MacArthur's war aim now appeared to be hot pursuit of the invader.
I thought we'd won the war. I shouldn't laugh at this point, but I have to. I thought we won the war, and I think that was the general feeling. And we went, I hope.
The giant Yalu River marks the boundary between North Korea and China. Across this border, the Chinese followed the war with alarm. They feared the American army in North Korea would invade the Chinese mainland.
If North Korea was defeated, only the Yalu River would separate us from the Americans. We couldn't accept this, nor the risk of American aircraft disrupting the reconstruction of our country.
From devastated North Korea, an urgent message went out to Beijing.
A government delegation was sent to Mount Zedong. What can we do there?
Secret cables from Stalin telling him to enter the war to save North Korea. Wanting to assert China's power in Asia, Mao was agreed.